All right, Jiri Prochazka is gone. He's no longer the champ. That is correct, as we know. Poor Jiri. I'm such a fan. He blew out his shoulder. It was the worst shoulder injury, Dana said, that they have ever seen in the history of the organization. So, of course, the shoulder's bad. He's going to be out for quite some time. And like a true samurai, he decided to step aside so that the division can move on. So he's not the champ anymore. He won the belt through blood, sweat and tears in a very, very hard fight. And he lost it without even stepping foot inside the octagon. Now, a lot of people are saying this is crazy. Ariel Helwani's coming out and he's talking a lot of shit. He's always talking shit, but other people are. But this is no fault of the UFC. It's not Jiri's fault. It's certainly not Glover Teixeira's fault, but it's just the facts. He's hurt, he's injured, someone else steps in, he steps away, a new title fight is on our hands. But still, guess what? This happens a lot. Fighters get hurt. Champions lose their titles. They lose their world championships, sometimes without even stepping foot in the goddamn octagon. That's what happened here. And guess what? It's happened quite a few times. So now I'm going to take you through a list of all the times that fighters who were champions lost their belts without losing it inside the octagon. All right, the first one on the list is Randy the Natural Couture. He became the UFC heavyweight champion in 1998. Now, Randy Couture first won the first of his 5 UFC world titles at UFC Japan in 1997, but he never defended them. No, instead, he chose to sign with Vale Tudo and the Rings promotion in Japan. And sadly, because of that, for old Randy, he was stripped for not being available to defend the belt. Of course, Randy would come back and he would win his titles back in November 2000 and then again in March 2007. And he would make successful defenses during both of those reigns. Shout out Randy the Natural Couture. What a legend. All right, speaking of legends, Bas Rutten, El Guapo. I mean, what a guy. This guy is absolutely hilarious. If you haven't seen his street fighting techniques, check those out.
Don't you ever do that.
But Bas Rutten, he came to the UFC at the end of his Hall of Fame career with a huge ambition. He wanted to be the first 2-weight division champion in the UFC. Of course, now BJ Penn's done it. Conor McGregor, Daniel Cormier, Amanda Nunes, Cejudo, and there will be others. But stage 1 was completed when he won the UFC championship at UFC 20 in May 1999 when he outpointed Kevin Randleman for the vacant UFC heavyweight title. But however, when he was trying to get that double champ status, training for the light heavyweight championship, trying to shift those pounds, he sustained a lot of injuries that sadly ended his career. So Baz's UFC record stands at 2-0 with 1 UFC heavyweight world championship with 0 defenses. All right, sticking with the heavyweight division, Josh Barnett, the baby-faced assassin. This guy was a legendary fighter. Fought all over the world, all the big organizations, a great grappler, trained with Eric Paulson, catches, catch-can, freestyle wrestling style, leg locks for days, you name it, the man can do it. He also likes to do steroids. Yes, that's a problem. That's an issue with the baby-faced assassin. Do not shoot me if you see me, Josh, because I'm a big fan of your work, but you can't deny that this did happen. Josh Barnett also, this did happen. He became the UFC heavyweight champion of the world in UFC 36, March 2002. Okay, sadly though, 120 days later, because testing wasn't as quick back then because it's the year 2002. The test came back and they were positive. So sadly, Josh Barnett was stripped of the belt and he didn't get to fight. He did not lose it through the old-fashioned way. He was stripped. All right, moving on. All right, moving weight class, we're going to go to the prodigy, BJ Penn, the UFC welterweight champion in 2004. Yes, BJ won the UFC welterweight title in just his 9th pro fight, and he defeated probably one of the most legendary fights that we ever saw. I am, of course, talking about the legend, Matt Hughes. Choked him out in the first round. Now, this was BJ Penn's 3rd attempt at UFC gold. He'd lost and he'd had a draw in the UFC lightweight championship fights that he had. But instead of sticking around and defending the welterweight title, Penn wanted to do what Dana White called crazy BJ stuff. And the crazy BJ stuff that Dana White was talking about was fighting Lyoto Machida at heavyweight in Japan in another organization. So that's not going to fly. It just isn't. So with Penn fighting in other promotions, sadly for BJ and the fans, the UFC had no choice. They had to strip BJ of the 170-pound title. Now, sadly, from there, you know what happens. There's court cases, there's litigation, there's nasty letters sent from both ways. But that all got settled because guess what? BJ Penn and Dana White sat down, they met face to face, and they figured out a new deal. And of course, BJ Penn, as I say, an absolute legend, the first two-weight division champion that we saw. Penn returned to the UFC after 2 years away, ultimately becoming the second two-division champion. As I said, winning the lightweight title in January 2008 in Newcastle, England, where he beat down Joe Daddy Stevenson. All right, going back to the heavyweights. These heavyweights like to lose belts pretty easy, don't they? But still, we're talking about Frank Mir, the UFC heavyweight champ in 2004. In the summer of 2004, Frank Mir was 25 years old, okay? The UFC thought that they had a heavyweight champion that was expected to have a long reign. He was going to be the face of the company, and he could talk well on a camera. He was smart, he was articulate, and he had incredible jiu-jitsu. As I say, they had massive, massive plans for him, but sadly, on September 17th, 2004, Frank Mir was knocked 40 foot in the air off his motorbike when a car slammed into him when he was traveling down the street in Las Vegas. The femur, the biggest bone in the body, was absolutely shattered and his knee was just destroyed as well. Now, of course, with horrific injuries like that, he was on the sidelines for over 2 years. So the UFC, they had no choice but to strip him so the division could move on. They waited around for over 2 years. And Frank Mir did come back. He did return. But when he came back, initially, he looked a shadow of himself, winning one fight and losing two. But he did turn things all around. Frank Mir is a true legend. He regained the UFC title, eventually becoming the first man ever to stop Antonio Minotauro Nogueira at UFC 92 in December 2008. All right, moving down to the featherweight division, I am talking about someone that didn't come here to take part. He came to take fucking over. Who am I talking about? Of course, the notorious one, Conor McGregor. And take over he did. Listen, quickly he rose to the top. He became the biggest star that we had ever seen, and he still is to this day the biggest pay-per-view draw. The rise through the featherweight division was like something we'd never seen before, and eventually he would get his crack at UFC 194, December 2015, when he took on Jose Aldo, the longtime featherweight king, and he knocked him out with one punch in 13 seconds. Now, as I say, he wanted to come and take over, and being champion in one division wasn't enough. He wanted to go up and fight the lightweight champion, Eddie Alvarez, and the UFC gave him that chance. So in November 2016, he knocked out Eddie Alvarez in the second round, I think it was, and that, again, what an absolutely beautiful performance. That was Conor at his absolute best. And he got his champ moment, and he got to say, listen, I want to apologize
to absolutely nobody.
The champ does whatever he wants. But for Conor McGregor, 14 days after becoming the lightweight champion, becoming the champ, the lightweight and the featherweight, 2 weeks after, he was stripped. Because guess what? He wasn't going to defend both belts, and he was going to stay at lightweight. So, who became champion again? Went back to Jose Aldo, because Jose Aldo had fought Frankie Edgar at UFC 200 in an interim title fight, and with Conor staying at lightweight, Jose was promoted back to the full champion once again. All right, going into the women's division right now, we are talking about Germaine de Randamie, the UFC women's featherweight champ in 2017. Now, she defeated Holly Holm on points at UFC 208 in February 2017 to become the first ever women's featherweight champion. However, through her management, sadly, she refused to fight Chris Cyborg. Through her management, she said Cyborg was a cheat and shouldn't be allowed to fight in the UFC. But if the UFC wanted to strip her, then she would happily accept that. So, of course, the UFC sadly did strip Germaine de Randamie and ultimately made Cyborg versus Tonya Evinger for the vacant featherweight title. And of course, as we know, Cyborg went out there, dominated the fight from start to finish and got the job done. Now, as far as de Randamie was concerned, she went down to bantamweight to challenge Amanda Nunes to become the champ there, but it was an unsuccessful attempt. In December 2019, Amanda Nunes got the job done, of course. That's why she's the lioness. All right, now here's a good one for you. GSP, the little lizard, okay? He came and became the UFC middleweight champion in 2017. This guy had been away for 4 years. He'd stepped away from the sport, but he saw a guy rise to the top, become a champion, and he knew for a goddamn fact that that champion had one eye. Yes, because that champion, me, was training with Jorge Blanco. Jorge Blanco is Georges St-Pierre's coach. George. We went out for dinner. We went out for drinks. We got acquainted. We became quite friendly. We're still friends to this day. And he knew damn well that I only had one eye. We discussed it at length. So, of course, when George found this out, he's like, I don't care if this guy is intoxicated, but he has one fucking guy, goddammit, and we're going to take this belt. Sorry, George. Absolutely love George. Terrible accent. And I did take the piss a little bit, but I was a little offended at the time, you know, because I knew what was going on. I couldn't talk about the fact that I only had one eye because that was the worst kept secret in all of mixed martial arts, but George fucking knew it. And he even said on the microphone afterwards that he targeted this side because he knew the punches, you know, he knew I wouldn't be able to see them coming from that side. But all's fair in love and war. I would have done the exact same thing to him. So George defeated me, choked me out unconscious and left me there in a pile of blood in Madison Square Garden. Thanks, George. And of course, he promised the UFC that he was going to be an active champion. But instead, St-Pierre vacated the belt on December 7th, 2017, citing the fact that he'd been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. His reign had lasted just 33 days. Was that really necessary, George? Was that necessary to choke me out and then abandon the belt after just 33 days? Love you, brother. All right, we're going back to the champ. We're going back to the notorious one, Conor McGregor, UFC lightweight title 2018. Listen, Conor never lost the featherweight strap and he never lost the lightweight belt. But he did take some time off, of course. His wife or girlfriend had a baby, so it took a little bit of time off then. And then in 2017, he pursued and he got the huge mega money boxing fight with Floyd Money Mayweather. Made a tremendous amount of money, but in doing so was away from the UFC. And then sadly, April 7th, 2018, due to inactivity after not defending the belt for 511 days, Conor McGregor was once again stripped of the belt for not defending, not being active, not being a current fighter. All right, the last one on the list goes to NICCO Montano, who was the UFC women's flyweight title holder in 2018. NICCO Montano, remember that name? She won the Ultimate Fighter, a new champion tour match. She beat Roxanne Modafferi to become the inaugural women's flyweight champion on December 2017. But she was stripped of the title 280 days later without ever defending it. Now, the day of the UFC 228 weigh-ins, just hours before her scheduled defense against Valentina Shevchenko, NICCO sadly collapsed and was taken to hospital, so that fight was scrapped. But Valentina Shevchenko, she did go out. She had a fight on a different event for the vacant title against Joanna Jędrzejczyk at UFC 231, and all the while, NICCO Montano has fought only once since, losing a bantamweight fight to Juliana Pena in the summer of 2018. So there it is. Well, of course, we have Jiri Prochazka, but you know the deal with Jiri. He just lost it. It just happened. It's big news. We're all over it. We got a new title fight, but there is champions in the UFC who lost it without fighting. Lost it, you know, the biggest prize in combat sports to be taken away. For whatever reason, maybe it sucks. Not for George. He fucking planned that thing all along, didn't he? The son of a bitch. But still, there it is. That just inspired me. I saw what happened to Jiri Prochazka, and it got me thinking, how many times has this happened? So we did a little research. So thank you very much to Ant, my researcher, my channel manager, John Brannigan, my editor, behind the scenes does all this great work. So thank you, because they helped me out a lot. But thank you guys for making this channel what it is. If you haven't subscribed and rung the bell, then what are you even doing with your life?